Welcome everyone to this second part of this video. Hope you the first part of this video about the resurrection and death was a blessing, and it was very helpful. Hope it was informative. Thank you very much for tuning in again. Now we were talking about the resurrection, death and the resurrection. So what it means to be, and what the death and resurrection, how important the resurrection is to our Christianity. I quoted from the evidence that demands a verdict, and all those things. So it's very important. Without the resurrection, there is no things. And why it is important, we saw about Peter in Acts of the Apostle speaking in the public, and we were talking about in Romans, which is the basis of our meditation today, reflection. That is the human form of Jesus is the Son of David. So everyone recognized him as the Son of David. Hosanna, Son of David, the people were saying, and you can look at the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1. We have the whole genealogy of Jesus, right? Okay, so we are starting from Abraham onwards. We are talking all the way to Joseph, Mary, and everything. And also we have a genealogy in the book of in the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 3, which goes back to Adam. So in all these things, we say in Luke chapter 3 verses 32 say son of David, the son of Jesse, son of Obed, and it always goes to Adam. So that is evidence there as well. So here we are talking about the humanity. So in Romans chapter 1, we are reading that the human form is son of David, and what we are saying about the divine form, he says, is being the Son. What's the proof of Jesus being the Son of God is the declaration, Son of by his resurrection. There's nothing else. There's no resurrection. So now let's come to divide these two parts. As I said, the death and the resurrection. As I said, please subscribe to my YouTube video, because in coming videos I'm going to talk about in detail about the sufferings of Jesus Christ. I'll be looking into some of the medical evidences and everything. It'll be very interesting, to be honest. So we are talking about the resurrection here, which is very, which is kind of the part and parcel of Christianity, and that's the only for which all of us witnesses, the holy saints of God and everyone who died as witnesses. That is very, very important. So letting you know this, let's talk about the death itself. The crucifixion is not something very rare circumstances which was happening. I always think about, people talk to me about what's the speciality about Jesus' death, and that there were so many crucifixions. Crucifixion was introduced, a form of punishment invented by the Persians, and which came to Rome. Romans used that for, if anyone is a spy or who's against the Roman empire, they usually punish them by crucifixion. Crucifixion was a very common punishment, but the cruelty of the crucifixion is it's unimaginable. The torture and everything, the scourging which preceded the crucifixion and everything is it's unimaginable. When I did a lot of studies on that, I could see why Jesus had to undergo this torture just for me. It's what it is so is it historical? When do you call it as historical or historical evidence? Or if what are the who are the witnesses? So again, I'm going back to Joseph's on the book. He says about let me get to that page. So what is historical? So when do we consider as a circumstantial evidence, you call it? He says when an event takes place in history and there are enough people alive who were eyewitnesses of it and or had participated in the event, and when the information is published, one is able to verify the validity of an historical event, then it becomes a circumstantial evidence. So it has to be when you call it as a part of history. I'm coming to the historical evidence, so that actually the death of Jesus was there physically. There was people present there, and actually happened. The death and resurrection happened. So what is the circumstantial evidences? So the definition I would give is when an event takes place in history and there are enough people alive who were participated in that event. So they must have. So I would call it. Let's say best example is we are talking about the virus here. If there was only one person who died in thing, and later in the history, now you are talking about the Spanish fever, and you are talking about the AIDS, you are talking about so many plagues before this. So there are so many people. So we say that happened. The fever did take place. The plague did take place because we have eyewitnesses, we have records. So then it's a historical event. It's a circumstantial evidence. So there is a validity of one is able to verify the validity of an historical event. So whether we are able to validate the historical evidence, then that is called as a circumstantial evidence. So what exactly is it? Is did it have really happen? Yes, the whole gospel is full of the passion and suffering. It's all there. The people who were involved in that. So how common was the crucifixion? I just want to give some examples of how the death of Jesus is so important. I would say, I'm reading from one of the books. They say crucifixion was widespread. It was not very uncommon. It was very. It was an Asian origin, like Asia Minor, Assyrians, Persians. They used this punishment. Like crucifixion was so common that during the slave led by Spartacus, that period, Spartacus about 73 to 71 BC we are talking about, they crucified about 6,000 of his followers were suspended on the cross. Just imagine 6,000 people were crucified from Rome to Capua. Throughout the road, the Spartacus time, because I've just written notes, I've just reading it out, the revolt of Spartacus against Rome. It is between 73 to 71 BC. There were 6,000 of his followers were suspended on the cross. Okay, and according to one of the historians, the Persians had 3,000 political opponents crucified, and also Antiochus of Syria had Jews in Jerusalem flogged and crucified for breaking the law. According to Josephus, Alexander and the Judean king had 800 opponents crucified in 267 BC in the presence of their wives. So this is how the torture used to be, like opponents crucified. Who this during the period of Antiochus IV of Syria, he had about 800 of his opponents crucified right in front of their wives and children, who were subsequently slaughtered when the men were still on the cross. Okay, and okay, again, Publius Varus, one of the Romans, had 2,000 crucified, according to Josephus, the historian, between 37 to 100 AD. He crucified about 2,000 men, and according to the historian Josephus, again, 500 Jewish prisoners were crucified per day during the Emperor Titus. So just imagine 200 were crucified, 500 Jewish prisoners were crucified per day. So all these census, I'll be talking about this when I'm talking about the crucifixion itself. I'll be going through in detail these numbers just to tell you about come to this topic of death of Jesus. I'm just telling you. So we are talking about during Spartacus period, 6,000 men being crucified. In Antiochus IV of Syria, you have about 800 people crucified. Just imagine, in front of their wives and children, and subsequently slaughtered while the men were still on the cross. It's terrible. And also Flavius Josephus, between 37 and 100 AD, he had 500 Jews crucified per day. So just imagine how common this crucifixion was. And also there's an interesting fact. The crucifixion itself is considered as a curse, but at the same time, in the old city of Jerusalem, it's not very custom as such. But the nails and all this process. So why we are not able to get any evidence of crucifixion or the nails? You can say, oh my God, so many people have crucified Conde just to find some nails or something. Now, some of them, those nails were stolen from the tombs, so what they were taken from their descendants almost immediately after. They were stolen from the tombs as well. Absent the presence of nails leaves no signs. We don't have any of them. To be honest, some of them, they took it as a good luck for them, and all those things. And so we don't have any of the nails or things like that. Of course, we do have some of them. As I said, when I'm discussing about the nailing Jesus to the cross, I'll be talking about the position where it was, and everything. That will be a very interesting chapter by itself. So I'm not going in much detail about that. I'm just talking about the death itself. So many people died on the cross, but there's only one death on the cross differs from the things. So that makes it a history. That makes the crucifixion so different, for which so many people died. Like I just read to you all the census. We have, this is a known thing. So as I told you, these people witnessed this historical event. Like Josephus, we can read in works of Josephus. It's a 4-volume book, and you have other volumes as well, which is interesting to read. These were the eyewitnesses, these people who heard about it and who were told about it. So only the death itself is so very important for us. This one man's death, Jesus' death, changed the whole history of salvation, that he has to die on the cross. This shameful, as we read, these people revolted, like Spartacus. If you're reading about Spartacus in his time, he led the revolt against the Romans. So what they did is they just hung on the trees, they call it, or crucified them on the trees, just on the roadside. It's common. So this shameful death of cross, like we were reading about 500 Jews per day. That is a lot of death. Crucifixion, everything so far, the cross and the death on the cross was a shame. Let's say if Jesus had not risen from the dead, the resurrection had not taken place, and that means the death of Jesus also would be in one of these, must have been lost in one of those 500s. Like, okay, Jesus was crucified, blah, the end of story. The cross would have been still a shameful death. Jesus' death would have been a shameful death. So, but not here. Here, the meaning, the changes, the death is given a new meaning. Why? Because of the resurrection. Only the resurrection has proved that Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, there are so many. So that is why I read from the book. It says the people who witnessed it. So the Bible is full of witnesses. So you have, we'll be going through Soldiers' Walk, and the people there, the women where Jesus' mother was there, and all these evidences that they lived. Okay, so the death is very important aspect. The death on the cross of Jesus was a very important thing in the history. That one man's death stands out from all these senses. The senses I gave you at the moment. Well, is there any more recent one? I'm inclined to read from the Antiquities of Jews by Josephus. Flavius Josephus. It's a very great thing. He lived in. Let me just get you the references quickly. So he's. So Josephus, he was, there was Antiquities of Jews. He lived in around 93 AD, after death, 93 to 94 AD, around that time. And he had all these notes written, the books. It has volumes and volumes of his witnesses. In the Antiquities of Jews, he writes in volume 4. I have 4 volumes of this book, but it also comes in 1 volume. If you get a chance, you can read. Again, these are not bedtime stories. It has very good references here in the Antiquities of Jews, where Flavius Josephus, Flavius Josephus, who lived between 93 and 94 AD, writes about Jesus thus. Okay, in chapter 19, verse 19, the 3rd section, he says, "But now, he talks about Jesus as well. He talks about, now there was about this time a wise man. I'm talking from I think it is chapter 19. Chapter 18. Chapter 18. Or section 18, you might call it, chapter 3, verse 3. Now, there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it would be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works. A teacher of such a man has received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to cross, those that loved him at first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the 3rd day, as the divine prophets had foretold these, and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribes of Christians so named from him are not extinct at this day. So this is a short paragraph about him, even though many historians don't accredit this thing, but he does say about the witness. He was traveler at the time, and what he heard about, and he has written this thing about Jesus, his crucifixion at that time, what he was, and everything. So what I'm trying to say is, this is not a lie. It actually took place, and there are so many, and also the resurrection itself. So in the Bible we read so many resurrections. That's the difference. What's the resurrection difference between the resurrection of Jesus and the resurrection of others? We read in the Old Testament, Elisha resurrecting the people. Even in the New Testament, Jesus raising Lazarus, that ninth son. Then Peter resurrecting. Then Jesus again, the centurion's daughter, and how about Paul resurrecting a man? So we read so many resurrections, but what is the uniqueness about the resurrection of Jesus is that all these people, they died after that. Let's say Lazarus, they say he became a bishop, then he died, and after resurrection, he didn't live forever and ever. Amen. No, he died. All these people who were resurrected died. But what is the difference between this resurrection and the resurrection of Jesus? Is that Jesus rose from then, and you have what is called as, he was taken up, the ascension. He was taken up to heaven, and he's there interceding for us. He's there for us. That's the uniqueness. There was no death for Jesus after that. He died once and he was resurrected. That's all. For this, the apostles are witnesses. So they were there. So that's what they are saying. Peter says in the Acts, we are the witnesses for this resurrection. For his resurrection, for his death, resurrection. There are so many theories which I'm going to discuss in the next section. Peter was there. You can't say no, it was not. Jesus was not there. Jesus didn't die. Jesus didn't do this. He was not resurrected. It's not possible, because these are all that happen, for which we have the witnesses, without which what I'm doing now after so many decades and so many years and centuries, I'm talking here because of that particular death. All these senses I gave you about the countings of death, but this one is unique, because these people must have died because they protested against, they did revolt against Romans, the Jews, they crucified them because they were punished. But here, what's the difference between the crucifixion of these men and Jesus is it was different. He died, even though when he died for me and for you. That is the speciality of this crucifixion and death. That's the speciality of this whole thing. That it stands out. For which so many people gave up their life. These Romans, you're talking about, they were killed because they were they killed Romans probably. But here Jesus, he was killed for no reason. All he did is he died for me. As I told you, I repeat that again and again. Even it was just me who's going to be in this whole world, but still, Jesus would have died for me. When I come back, I'm going to talk to you about some of the theories, which is very important, because this resurrection and death and resurrection. I mean, it should be so personal. That is a part and parcel of this little circle of love I was talking about. He lived this love. He lived this love. That's what I would say. That he died for me and for you and for this humanity. Even in we were sin. If okay, you can give a life for someone who's innocent, but he gave a life for us. I think St. Paul says in his letter. So I will get that reference to you shortly. So as we are spending this video about the death, so let's for one moment, as a family, as a personal, what this death means to us. What is individuality? That the humanity of Jesus as a son of David and his divinity as a son of God, which is established through the resurrection, is so important to us. We have that needs quite a bit of meditation and reflection, without which the Christianity and everything would be nothing. So friends, let's this season, as I'm recording this on a Easter Sunday, it makes me think the amazing grace, the amazing opportunity that we have as Christians, have to be witnesses for this resurrection. We are talking about the miracles and so many other things. Of course, that is there. That's a part of the history. That's a part of the good news. But the more important part of this good news is the death and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, who suffered for me and for you, and that we have to be witnesses of that. That's what Paul says in the letter to the Romans, and Peter preached to the early, to the public, that death. Otherwise, why would he preach that so boldly? If that event had not happened, why would he stand in front of the public and preach about the whole thing? We will continue with that in our next video. God bless.